It was the arrangement that catapulted Spotify to the top of the podcasting world, but it has now landed the firm in the middle of a heated controversy over misinformation and free expression. Here's a complete rundown of the situation. First up, Spotify pursues Joe Rogan. Spotify was already the undisputed king of music streaming, but to help launch the firm into its next phase as an all-purpose audio powerhouse, and to further fight Apple and Google, it sought a celebrity podcaster, similar to how Howard Stern helped put satellite radio on the map in 2006. Spotify execs came to see Joe Rogan, a comedian and sports pundit whose no-holds-barred podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, was already a massive smash on YouTube as that transformational figure. Following a lengthy courting, Spotify announced a license arrangement to exclusively air Mr. Rogan's show in May 2020. As per two people who spoke anonymously, since they were not at liberty to discuss the transaction, the deal between Spotify and Mr. Rogan stood at about $200 million or more, which covered 3.5 years. Next, Rogan causes problems for Spotify, but in recent weeks, the program that catapulted Spotify to the top of the podcast market has also put it at the heart of the kind of cultural tempest that has long consumed Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, with questions about the responsibility internet behemoths have for the material on their platforms. It all started when some well-known musicians, led by Neil Young, removed their music from the service to protest what they called COVID vaccination misinformation on Mr. Rogan's show. Then, on social media, video from earlier Joe Rogan Experience episodes went viral, showing him repeatedly using a racial slur and laughing at jokes about sexual exploitation, causing Mr. Rogan to apologize for his previous use of the slur. A social media movement called #DeleteSpotify began asking for a boycott. Furthermore, numerous Spotify podcasters openly chastised Mr. Rogan and the site, and Spotify refuses to comment. Executives at Spotify declined to be interviewed. Dusty Jenkins, a corporate spokesperson, declined to comment on the conditions of Mr. Rogan's contract. Mr. Rogan's representatives did not reply to several requests for comment. Even in the inflated podcast industry, the Joe Rogan Experience deal was exceptional. According to corporate documents, Spotify bought whole content firms Gimlet Media and The Ringer for some amount short of $200 million apiece, with tens of millions of listeners for its most popular episodes. The Joe Rogan Experience is Spotify's top podcast, not just in the United States, but in 92 other markets, with a fan base that hangs on every word of his hour-long broadcasts. Spotify mentions podcasts, specifically Mr. Rogan's program, as a driver in the long-awaited rise of its advertising business in its financial reports. Daniel Ek, Spotify's CEO, told staff at a recent company meeting that exclusive content like Mr. Rogan's program is critical artillery in Spotify's battle against tech Goliaths like Apple and Google. But Spotify finally responds. Spotify replied to Mr. Rogan's rising public criticism by confirming its commitment to free expression, despite the removal of scores of Mr. Rogan's previous episodes. It also made its content rules public for the first time, announced that content advisory labels will be added to episodes covering the coronavirus, and vowed to give $100 million to work by producers from historically underrepresented communities. The actions occurred as Spotify faced mounting dissatisfaction from high-profile creators. Ava DuVernay, the film director who announced a podcast contract with Spotify a year ago, cut her relations with Spotify this month, and Jamel Hill, a former ESPN analyst, said that Spotify's support of Mr. Rogan had caused difficulties with her audience and prompted doubts about the company's commitment to minority talent. What I would like to see, Ms. Hill said in an interview, is for them to hand $100 million to somebody who is black. Next, are there high hopes for Joe Rogan? Spotify's entry into podcasting is the conclusion of years of planning to find a more profitable business than hosting music, for which it must pay around 2/3 of every dollar to rights holders. The firm dabbled in video about 2015, but nothing came of it. By 2018, the year Spotify's shares were listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the company was making plans to pursue Mr. Rogan, intending to boost its market position in non-music audio and chip away at Apple and Google's YouTube domination. The Joe Rogan Experience was one podcast that officials believed may help Spotify grow at the desired rate. Despite the fact that Mr. Mr. Rogan hosted conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, who has spread false theories that the 2012 killing of 20 children and 6 educators at an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut was a hoax. Mr. Jones had been barred from Spotify 2 years prior for violating its hate speech policy. Mr. Rogan is not your typical one-sided media pundit. He backed Bernie Sanders for president and campaigned for universal health care. However, he holds certain libertarian beliefs and has expressed doubt regarding vaccinations, claiming that healthy young people, for example, do not need to be vaccinated for COVID-19, contrary to what scientists and health experts have been advocating. The left-wing watchdog organization Media Matters for America has recorded more than 20 instances of what it calls COVID-19 disinformation, racism, and anti-trans rhetoric on Mr. Rogan's show in 22 alone. Mr. Rogan said on his program after his deal with Spotify was announced that it would be the same show, reassuring listeners who were concerned about increasing corporate influence. "I will not be working for Spotify." Spotify's stock price increased by 17% the week the agreement was revealed. Now, let's talk about internal conflicts. According to current and former workers who saw the events at the time, one staff group, Spectrum, comprised of LGBT members or supporters, challenged management on why Spotify had made the arrangement with Mr. Rogan while knowing how contentious some of his content might be. There were also worries within Spotify that the firm had not invested sufficiently in moderation tools to examine podcasts, a topic known as trust and safety. The weekly influx of podcasts posed an additional concern related to hazardous content that the firm had not previously dealt with as a music provider. Mr. Eck defended the company's policies at the time while visiting with several of the worried employee groups in an attempt to allay their fears. The management viewpoint, on the other hand, was unequivocal. Mr. Rogan was not going anywhere. As the months passed and Mr. Rogan showed no signs of backing down from controversy, more individuals close to the firm began to speak out against his position on the site. Next, the controversy blows up. According to a person involved in the discussions, in January, after 270 scientists, medical professionals, and others wrote to Spotify to express concerns about COVID-related misinformation on Mr. Rogan's show, executives made internal assurances that the company was taking the issue seriously and that it was continuing to review Mr. Rogan's shows to ensure they were complying with Spotify's rules. The controversy erupted on January 24 when Mr. Young, the rock star, demanded that his music be deleted from Spotify due to coronavirus misinformation. He wrote that they can have Rogan or Young, not both. Joni Mitchell followed him off the site, and within days, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle, who have their own arrangement to make podcasts for Spotify but have only produced one, raised their own worries over COVID misinformation on the platform. Now, let's look at how attempts to contain the situation failed. In the midst of the reaction, Mr. Rogan pledged to give balance to the topics discussed on his show. However, the situation deepened a few days later when R&B singer India.Arie shared a video collection of Mr. Rogan repeatedly using a racist slur and stating that she too would delete her song. She and other musicians used the occasion to underscore long-standing criticisms that the streaming economy does not adequately compensate artists. According to two current Spotify employees, while the scandal raged, many staff believed management was too sluggish to respond. It also sparked concerns on Spotify's board of directors, with some members dissatisfied with the company's slow response, according to a source familiar with the events who wanted to remain anonymous due to confidentiality agreements. In Sweden, freedom of expression is highly regarded. Many staff in both countries were outraged when Spotify banned music by R. Kelly and XXXTentacion from playlists in 2018 due to material or behavior considered to be objectionable, a decision the business subsequently overturned. Mr. Eck has stated that he is hesitant to take on the job of censor. They're not in the business of dictating the discourse that these creators want to have on their shows, he told employees earlier this month in a speech first reported by The Verge, adding that if they only wanted to make content that we all like and agree on, they'd have to eliminate religion and politics and comedy and health and the environment and education, and the list goes on and on. According to Mark Mulligan, an industry analyst with Media Research, restricting Mr. Rogan might alienate his army of followers and establish a dangerous precedent with other podcasters. Lastly, Rogan disappearing and reappearing on the service. Mr. X stated in a recent message to workers that removing voices is a slippery slope, although he did admit that a number of episodes of Mr. Rogan's program had been pulled from the site. Mr. Rogan chose to delete them following talks with Spotify management and his own observations, he wrote. The Joe Rogan Experience has resurfaced yesterday morning on Spotify after being inaccessible for a brief while. As of yet, neither the popular audio streaming site nor Joe Rogan himself have provided an explanation. When the program went offline for a short time on Friday, Spotify blamed it on technical difficulties. That's a wrap for this video. See you in the next one.